welcome to the Trading Bell. Glad that you have joined us. And I say it again, Happy New Year. I hope it's not too late to say that. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Now, at the close of last year, we had quite a number of changes, especially on the tax laws, especially on the Tax Laws Amendment Act 2024, the Tax Procedures Act 2024. What does this mean for business, especially the operating environment, and what are the net effects, especially on the economy? We want to discuss that question. I'm joined by two amazing gentlemen. I have Churchill Ogutu in the house, who's an economist at ISEC Group, and Fred Kimodo, Associate Director at Deloitte East Africa. Let's get straight into the conversation. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me start with you, Fred. On a basic level, what really motivated these particular changes that we're seeing in the Tax Laws Amendment Act and the Tax Procedures Act 2024?
Thank you, Maina, again for having us, and Happy New Year to our audience as well.
Absolutely.
You will recall that in June 2024, there was a finance bill that was withdrawn just before it was assented to by the president.
Absolutely.
The finance bill 2024 was targeting to raise around 346 billion Kenya shillings. So as a result of the withdrawal of the bill, then what it meant is that there was a gap of that particular revenue. There was a revenue shortfall of 346 billion. So I guess then, even though there was the conversation of doing some budget cuts as a way of fiscal consolidation, the budget cuts were not seen to be enough. There had to be then tax laws that would be introduced for them to try and close that particular gap. And that's, I think, the main motivation as to why you saw the Tax Laws Amendment Act being enacted last year. And of course, the Tax Procedures Bill and other business laws that were also enacted in terms of just trying to spark growth in the economy. So I think the Tax Laws Amendment Bill by itself, I think the figures that you have seen out there, it's aimed at raising around 174 billion Kenya shillings, which then speaks to the reason why they were more or less motivated by the fact that we needed to mobilize some additional revenue. But besides that, you recall that we have a medium-term revenue strategy. It's a policy document that speaks to a number of changes. So given that quite a number of changes had already been taken in under the finance bill of 2024, which was withdrawn, I think there was also then the push from the government to ensure that those policy decisions are also taken into account. And as such, we saw quite a number of changes that were in the finance bill of 2024 that had been motivated by the medium-term revenue strategy coming in through the Tax Laws Amendment Bill and the Tax Procedures Amendment Act. Yes.
But just let me bring you in and ask you, you have the bird's eye view, I keep saying that, of looking at how we're operating here locally and even around Africa. But I want to ask you, how do these laws align with the Kenya's fiscal and economic priorities from your point of view?
Thanks, Maina, and thanks once again for having us. I totally agree with Fred's sentiments around the whole rationale of bringing these two pieces of legislation around the tax revenue mobilization. As has been correctly pointed out, basically this came after the shelving off of the finance bill 2024, and where there was a gap that was there. And obviously, once a legislation has gone to parliament, and for one reason or another has been shelved off, as was the case with finance bill, there's usually a 6-month period before that particular bill is being reintroduced. So the finance bill was brought into parliament in May. So that's where you saw in November this particular tax bills being reintroduced in different formats, but basically cherry picking some of the positive aspects of finance bills, quote unquote positive aspects. So that is where we are. But obviously the overarching theme is basically the revenue mobilization efforts, the gap that was there, which was around 347 billion from the finance bill. And here we have close to around 175 billion to be mobilized from these two set of legislations, the tax amendment and also the tax procedures. And then another thing is that if I may take you back to the other previous financial year, the one that ended in June 2024, on the expenditure side, there was close to around 215 billion that was not made by the end of the last financial year. And this is because of the revenue and the performance, even despite the supplementary budget that we saw coming in April, we were not able to meet the revenue, and that impacted negatively the spending for the last financial year. So the supplementary budget that was passed in the first in the month of August incorporated 68 billion out of that to 15 billion. So from reading the IMF report, it's like they want now to be able to sort of the unspent spending to be able to be made in the current financial year. So you are at a situation whereby you are increasing spending, but there's no money to be able to fund the spending. So that's pretty much the rationale behind even this tax laws amendment.
Okay, excellent there. And Fred, let me bring you in. There's a lot of debate that yes, we are bringing these laws, these amendments, and one of the key questions is: are we attracting, foreign investments, or are we pushing them away?
What would be my answer? I think my answer would be yes and no. Why do I say yes? The reason I say yes is because if you look at Tax Laws Amendment Act itself, there are quite a number of changes that are pro-investment. I think key among them, you'll recall some time back, Kenya increased the CGT rate or the capital gains tax rate from 5% to 15%. Now we have seen a move under the Tax Laws Amendment Act where they have lowered the 15% to 5% for investments that are certified by the Nairobi International Financial Center, which is good for investment. We've also seen a move to exempt transfer of businesses, which is also good for investment, for investors. Because remember, prior to this particular amendment, if you are to transfer your business as a going concern, you are required to account for VAT at the rate of 16%, which is very, it's actually against international best practice. And I'm not aware of any of the countries across the region or even across Africa that probably impose that level of taxation. So going back to the exemption then is also a good thing. I think you have also seen some other changes, for example, removal of VAT on raw materials for the textile industry, some specific raw materials, which is also good for the textile industry. Why do I say no? And I hope I don't count more issues than the yes that we do have. But of course, we also have some, and not specific to the Tax Laws Amendment Act. I think Kenya, though we have a national tax policy, we have seen quite a number of frequent changes. Which is not very good for businesses. So sometimes investors are keen to invest in an environment where the tax environment is a bit stable. Because you don't want to make decisions today for the tax policies to be reversed, the following year when you have already put in your commitment for investment. So I think the frequent changes that we are seeing in the tax laws are not good for the economy. And of course, quite a number of other things, especially as we try to net more taxes from the digital economy. We have seen the doubling of the what we call the digital service tax rate, although now it has been rebranded to something else. I'm sure we'll get to that conversation. So we have seen doubling of the rate from 1.5% to 3%. We've also seen an effort, or rather, an introduction of a provision that targets taxation of income that is accrued or derived through a digital marketplace in form of withholding tax, and it is drafted in such a manner that it more or less actually captures non-residents who are actually supplying digital services to Kenya through a platform that is also a non-resident, which is obviously then not very good for business, because if I'm seated, for example, in South Africa, and I have an option of selling my goods through a certain platform in the US, and they tell me if I sell to Kenya, I'll do a deduction of 20%, I'm likely to be motivated to tell them sell to any other market but not Kenya. So I think those are some of the things that we probably see that may be against investments. But overall, I think we are headed to the right direction.
Chachi, let me bring you in because from the bird's eye view again, you're looking at what other countries are doing as well in Africa and those kind of things. And I'm sure you have seen these conversations happen. I don't know whether we are the ones pioneering it here in Kenya, but from your own view, could you touch on that conversation on what they are doing internally? But also, we're talking about stability, as Fred has put it, in a way that we do not really chase away the investors. We want them to as well feel this is predictable. Have we got into that level where at least you can say the changes are not too crazy, or are we still have a long way to go?
Thanks. As to first, what's happening across the continent, if you look at issues to do with digital taxation, it's gaining currency, and it's part of the OECD and a number of reforms around the digital economy, things such as minimum tax. You find that a number of economies are gradually implementing some of those principles from the OECD. So it's done on a piecemeal basis. Obviously, as you can see, digital economy is quite, it used to be one of those hard to tax, or it wasn't taxable tax sector up until 5-10 years ago. So a number of countries are pretty much following the same route. Getting into the predictability, I mean, that's something that has been concerning to the businesses. More so the frequency of the tax changes. More so in Kenya, that's been quite of the thorny issues. If you sort of do a comparable analysis of even the various tax bills across the East Africa, for instance, you find that the number of tax proposals in Kenya is quite numerous, like say Uganda or even in Tanzania. So that just tells us the way in Kenya that we keep on changing the taxes at an alarming rate, and which is quite concerning even to the businesses. And as Fred had mentioned earlier on, you may find that a change is put in this financial year, the next financial year is reverted back. So it doesn't bring the certainty to the businesses. So that's something that if the authorities could have stuck to the medium-term revenue strategy. And this is a framework that has to be implemented in 2 phases. The first one was from the current financial year all the way to financial year ending in June 2027, and then the second phase all the way to June 2030. And it was clear in terms of the tax proposals that need to be put in place and the financial year that needs to be put in place. If they could have adhered to that, because it's something that is visible to businesses, to everyone, at least that could have removed the layer of uncertainty that is normally there. But what did they do? I think they probably excitement of trying to hone additional revenue, and then they sort of pivoted away from the medium-term revenue strategy. But at least right now, from what you are hearing, the tone from what you're hearing from the current fiscal authorities is that they are slowly reverting back, at least to adhere to the medium-term revenue strategy.